हेलो एवरीबडी एंड वेलकम टू टुडेज़ वीडियो। आज का वीडियो इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट बिकॉज द टॉपिक ऑफ डिस्कशन फॉर टुडे इज़ कार्बन मार्केट्स एंड कार्बन क्रेडिट्स। नाउ दिस टॉपिक इज़ इम्पॉर्टेंट बिकॉज ऑफ द रिसेंटली नोटिफाइड जो सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट हैज़ रिसेंटली नोटिफाइड द ड्राफ्ट कार्बन क्रेडिट ट्रेडिंग स्कीम। तो सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट ने ये स्कीम का ड्राफ्ट निकाला है बिकॉज इट हैज़ लॉन्ग हिंटेड ऑन सेटिंग अप एन इंडियन कार्बन मार्केट। तो ये सेटअप करेगा ये इंडियन कार्बन मार्केट बाय फर्स्टली इस्टेब्लिशिंग अ नेशनल फ्रेमवर्क जो कि हेल्प करेगा इन डीकार्बनाइजिंग द डोमेस्टिक इकोनॉमी by basically pricing the greenhouse gas emissions via trading in carbon credit certificates. I'll be defining these terms in next few minutes. Now, as I said, that carbon market and carbon credit is a very important topic. So you might be asking why. So these are the reasons why it is important. First, कि अभी ये रिसेंटली नोटिफाइड जून 2023 में दिस ड्राफ्ट कार्बन क्रेडिट ट्रेडिंग स्कीम हैज़ बिन नोटिफाइड बाय द सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट, राइट? So there is a good probability of carbon credit or carbon market or this particular scheme related question coming in your pre as well as mains 2024. Then already इससे question पूछा गया है, राइट? अगर आप देखेंगे यूपीएससी प्रीवियस ईयर्स क्वेश्चन के अंडर 2011 में they've already asked this question. Take a look at this question. Regarding carbon credits, which one of the following statements is not correct? यानी if it has come before, there's a good chance, good probability कि फिर से आ ही सकता है. Number 4, carbon credit and carbon market can be used in your mains answer, right? Generally every year question comes on climate change, on decarbonizing industry, etc. तो अगर क्वेश्चन पूछा जाए कि हाउ टू रीच नेट ज़ीरो emissions or how to become carbon neutral or how can industries assist in climate change, how can India fulfill its nationally determined contributions, so you can always use carbon credits and carbon markets to enrich your answer, and this will help you score brownie points, right? Now, before we go into the draft scheme, let us understand the keywords. First, let us try to understand what are carbon credits, right? So these form the basis of this entire scheme. So let's understand what carbon credits are. Carbon credits को दूसरा नाम से जाना जाता है carbon offsets. तो if there is a question on carbon offsets, don't be confused कि ये क्या है, ये carbon credits ही है, दूसरा नाम है carbon credits, right? So let us understand this. Generally, carbon markets will be set up by the government. इसमें क्या होगा, कार्बन मार्केट में क्या होगा, गवर्नमेंट एक लिमिट रखेगा ऑन ऑल द इंडस्ट्रीज, बोलेगा कि एवरी ईयर दीज इंडस्ट्रीज कैन एमिट अप टू 100 metric tons of greenhouse gas या कार्बन. ठीक है, गवर्नमेंट कैन से दैट देर इज अ कैप, लिमिट को ऑल्सो इज नोन एज कैप. वील टॉक अबाउट कैप एंड ट्रेड लेटर, बट अंडरस्टैंड लिमिट इज ऑल्सो नोन एज कैप. ठीक है ना? गवर्नमेंट कैन कीप अ कैप ऑफ 100 metric tons of GHG दैट कैन बी एमिटेड पर ईयर. मतलब एक इंडस्ट्री इस साल में 2023 में ओनली 100 metric tons GHG एमिट कर सकता है. ठीक है, एंड फॉर दैट carbon credits will be given. So one carbon credit will be equivalent to 1 metric ton of GHG. मतलब जितना भी ये इंडस्ट्री एमिट करे उसके इक्विवेलेंट कार्बन क्रेडिट उसका डिडक्ट होगा. से फॉर एग्जांपल ये इंडस्ट्री ए, ठीक है ना, इट एमिट्स इस साल में 2023 में इट एमिट्स से 90 metric tons of GHG, जिसका मतलब है आउट ऑफ 100 कार्बन क्रेडिट्स दैट वर गिवन टू इट, it has used 90 कार्बन क्रेडिट्स, उसका रिमेनिंग बचा है 10 कार्बन क्रेडिट्स, बट उसका यूज़ हो चुका है 90 कार्बन क्रेडिट्स, राइट। लेकिन ये भी हो सकता है दैट इस साल में अनदर इंडस्ट्री बी फॉर एग्जाम्पल हैज़ एमिटेड 130 metric tons of greenhouse gas. इसका मतलब है it has exceeded its emission by 30 metric tons. So once it has exceeded 30 metric tons, इसका मतलब है it has already used 100 कार्बन क्रेडिट्स ऑफ इस मतलब इसका इनका जो लिमिट था 100 metric tons of carbon of metric tons of greenhouse gas that it could emit. So it has exceeded that limit. It has emitted extra 30 metric tons and it has used up all 100 carbon credits, and now it needs 30 extra carbon credits. तो गवर्नमेंट बोलेगा ये आप 30 जो कार्बन क्रेडिट्स लेंगे एक्स्ट्रा उसका पैसा दे दीजिए एंड आई विल गिव यू दिस 30 कार्बन क्रेडिट्स जो ऑफसेट कर लेगा आपका 30 मेट्रिक टन्स ऑफ एक्स्ट्रा एमिशन ऑफ ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस, राइट। और फिर ये जो 30 carbon credits का money the government will get. So now it will be used in greening projects, carbon sequestration projects, forest planting projects, afforestation, etc. etc. So ये सब projects में the government will use the extra funds so that this kind of balances out, right? जो एक्स्ट्रा ग्रीन हाउस गैस एमिशन हुआ है ड्यू टू विच द क्लाइमेट वॉज नेगेटिवली इम्पैक्टेड और फॉरेस्ट वर नेगेटिवली इम्पैक्टेड, तो उसे ऑफसेट करने के लिए दिस फंड दैट इट विल रिसीव, द मनी दैट इट विल रिसीव फॉर द एक्स्ट्रा कार्बन क्रेडिट्स, सो दिस विल बी यूज्ड इन सच plantation projects, etc. So this is basically how an entire carbon credit thing works. This carbon credit works and this will occur in a carbon market. Yani government will be or government or even any third party, any entity, private entity will set up this carbon credit buying and selling scheme. So in return of money it will sell these carbon credits for certain amount of emissions, और एक्स्ट्रा एमिशंस के लिए इट विल प्रोवाइड एक्स्ट्रा कार्बन क्रेडिट्स एंड दीज फंड्स विल गो इनटू mitigating or tackling climate change or these other carbon sequestration project, afforestation projects, etc. Now let's come to the other part. Now that you know what carbon credit is, I have told you कि ये एक part है of cap and trade scheme. It's half of the cap and trade scheme. So we need to understand what is this cap and trade scheme first. So as I've said that it is the government who sets up the carbon market, right? तो वो issue करते हैं carbon credits and accordingly sell it to the industries and puts a limit on the amount of greenhouse gas emissions it can emit in a year, greenhouse gas it can emit in a year. उससे ज़्यादा if it exceeds then it has to offset it by purchasing extra carbon credit, right? So now how can two industries use this in a cap and trade scheme? So what can happen is that, as I've said, कि there can be industries जिनका कम carbon credit use किया हो और कुछ industries which has used more carbon credits than what is allotted to them, right? So one industry, let's take an example, say for example industry A and there is industry B. Now industry A, out of this 100 carbon credit in a year, it has used only 60 of it. मतलब it has only done 60 metric tons of emissions that year. So it has helped the climate by not emitting 40 metric tons of greenhouse gases, thereby saving 40, इनके पास 40 carbon credits extra है, surplus है, okay? It's a surplus of 40 carbon credits. On the other hand, industry B, as I've given the example in the previous slide, it has emitted 130 metric tons. It has exceeded its emission, it's exceeded its cap, ठीक है ना? तो जो लिमिट था उससे एक्सीड कर गया, तो इसका मतलब है इट हैज़ यूज्ड ऑल 100 ऑफ इट्स कार्बन क्रेडिट्स एंड नाउ रिक्वायर्स 30 कार्बन क्रेडिट्स टू ऑफसेट इट्स एक्स्ट्रा एमिशन. उनको ऑफसेट करना पड़ेगा फॉर इट्स एक्स्ट्रा एमिशन. तो इंस्टेड ऑफ गोइंग एंड परचेजिंग फ्रॉम द गवर्नमेंट, what it can do, industry A and industry B can come to an agreement. They can come to an agreement. तो इंडस्ट्री ए को, इंडस्ट्री बी इंडस्ट्री ए को बोलेगा, सी यू हैव 40 एक्स्ट्रा कार्बन क्रेडिट्स, ठीक है ना, एंड आई नीड 30 कार्बन क्रेडिट्स. तो फॉर अ पर्टिकुलर सम ऑफ मनी कैन यू सेल मी योर कार्बन क्रेडिट, 30 कार्बन क्रेडिट्स, कैन यू सेल इट टू मी. तो इंडस्ट्री ए बोलेगा कि या श्योर, तो आप मुझे इतना एक्स अमाउंट ऑफ मनी दीजिए एंड आई विल सेल यू माई 30, आई विल सेल यू 30 कार्बन क्रेडिट्स. तो उससे क्या होगा, देयर विल बी अ बैलेंस. देयर विल बी अ बैलेंस. इंडस्ट्री ए कैन सेल उनका कार्बन एक्स्ट्रा जो सरप्लस जो कार्बन क्रेडिट है, इट कैन सेल इट टू इंडस्ट्री बी विच नीड सच कार्बन क्रेडिट्स in order to offset its extra emissions. Industry A could have sold its extra carbon credits, जो 40 carbon credits थे, it could have sold it to the government as well for money. ठीक है ना, it has the option of selling either to the government or to industry B, C, D, whoever requires these extra carbon credits. ठीक है, तो ये बन जाएगा पार्ट ऑफ गवर्नमेंट्स एमिशन रिडक्शन पॉलिसी. इससे क्या होगा, industries will be incentivized. They'll be incentivized to invest in cleaner technology, ठीक है, as well as reduce their emissions. देखिए, अगर इंडस्ट्री बी every year it has to spend so much of money buying extra carbon credits, तो वो सोचेगा कि नहीं कि isn't it better to invest in a technology that reduces my greenhouse gas emission, ताकि I don't have to keep on purchasing these extra carbon credits, क्योंकि उनका भी लॉस हो रहा है in purchasing such carbon credits, ठीक है ना. तो in order to reduce their losses, तो वो क्या करेगा, इधर अपना ग्रीन हाउस गैस एमिशंस कम कर देगा, या तो फिर वो इन्वेस्ट करेगा टेक्नोलॉजी में जो कि हेल्प करेगा उन्हें इन रिड्यूसिंग द ग्रीन हाउस गैस एमिशन. आप देखिए, जैसे इंडस्ट्री ए, they automatically had an incentive to reduce their emissions. So basically this is how cap and trade works between different industries or with industry and government, where there will be purchase and sale and purchase of carbon credits according to their needs. Now carbon market can be of two types. एक है mandatory market और दूसरा है voluntary market. As the name suggests, under the mandatory market, ठीक है ना, under the mandatory market industries have to necessarily comply with the carbon credit scheme. Or under voluntary market, industries may or may not comply with the carbon credit scheme. अब under mandatory market, it will constitute of those industries who will have to necessarily comply, and under voluntary market there it will constitute of industries who may voluntarily choose to comply. अब कैसे डिसाइड होगा कि कौन सा इंडस्ट्री मैंडेटरी मार्केट में अंडर होगा कि कौन सा इंडस्ट्री वॉलंटरी मार्केट के अंडर होगा, तो इट विल डिपेंड completely or partially upon their carbon intensity, their carbon emission, and the size of this carbon sector. ठीक है ना, मतलब फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर एक इंडस्ट्री, से फॉर एग्जाम्पल इंडस्ट्री ए emits 300 metric tons of carbon, yeah, whatever greenhouse gas every year. So 300 metric tons is a lot, right? So such industry which emits a lot of greenhouse gases, they have to mandatorily comply with this carbon credit scheme. They have to make reductions in their emissions. They have to engage in the cap and trade scheme. समझ रहे? They have to mandatorily engage in the carbon market. Whereas an industry B, जिसका एमिशन एवरी ईयर होता है 10-20 मेट्रिक टन मे बी, ठीक है ना। तो इतना कम एमिशंस है इनके, तो दे आर नॉट रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर अ लॉट ऑफ द climate change that is happening. They're not responsible for a lot of pollution that is happening. Industry A might be responsible for polluting the environment because they emit a huge amount of greenhouse gases, but industry B does not. 10-20 metric ton is nothing compared to the 300 metric ton that industry A is emitting. सो इंडस्ट्री बी कैन बी केप्ट अंडर द वॉलंटरी मार्केट. उसे कहा जाएगा कि आप ऐसे कार्बन क्रेडिट्स खरीद भी सकते हैं, नहीं भी खरीद सकते हैं, आप परचेज कर सकते हैं, आप सेल कर सकते हैं, नहीं कर सकते, ये आपकी मर्जी. You can engage in the carbon market, you can engage in the cap and trade scheme as per your choice. And this choice is being given because the carbon intensity, its carbon emission is very less. So according to the amount of carbon emission, carbon intensity, industries can be categorized under mandatory market and under voluntary market. And whichever industry falls under the mandatory market, they'll have to necessarily comply. मतलब ये compulsory है, उनके पास कोई choice नहीं बनता है. Unlike the industries that fall under the voluntary market, who have the choice of whether they want to engage in the carbon market or not. Now coming to the more important part, let us talk about the draft carbon credit trading scheme 2023, जिसको जून 2023 में the central government had notified, right? So what does this trading scheme talk about? So if you see, and this is all directly quoted from the actual document, so it talks about focusing on the creation of governance mechanism and specifying the constitution and role of various entities aimed at decarbonizing the Indian economy by pricing greenhouse gases emission through trading of carbon credit certificates. तो इसमें इम्पॉर्टेंट बात आप ये याद रखिएगा, ये जो कार्बन क्रेडिट ट्रेडिंग स्कीम जो है, ये गवर्नेंस, एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन और जो भी एंटिटीज़ सेटअप किया जाएगा फॉर द रेगुलेशन पर्पस ऑफ सच कार्बन क्रेडिट सर्टिफिकेट्स to reduce greenhouse gas emission. So this document talks about such governance, administration issues and such entities which will be set up for the purpose of decarbonization. So under this carbon credit certificate, Indian carbon market and compliance mechanism has been defined. I've broadly defined these previously and जो document है उसमें यही definition more or less दिया है, थोड़ा wording change करके, but yes, this is, I've already defined these. Then the thing that it talks about is the administrative framework. As I've said that this focuses on firstly the governance mechanism. तो govern करने के लिए, इसे administer करने के लिए एक administrative framework होना चाहिए, एक body बनना चाहिए, and that body is Indian Carbon Market Governing Board, जो कि ओवरसी करेगा द रेगुलेटरी एंड एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव फंक्शन ऑफ द इंडियन कार्बन मार्केट. सो दिस विल बी जॉइंटली हेडेड बाय द सेक्रेटरी, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरनमेंट, फॉरेस्ट एंड क्लाइमेट चेंज, as well as the secretary of Ministry of Power. Now let us take a look briefly at the functions of the Indian carbon market governing body. So I'll not go into the detail, I'll just highlight some of the important ones. So as you can see, the governing body has a lot of recommendatory powers. So it can recommend to the central government to establish rules and regulations for the functioning of the Indian carbon market, or it can recommend procedures for the institutionalization of such market, right? फिर ये projects को approve कर सकता है और recommend कर सकता है the methods to be used for the voluntary mechanism. फिर सेल ऑफ सच कार्बन सर्टिफिकेट्स, कार्बन क्रेडिट सर्टिफिकेट्स, तो इसके इशुएंस के लिए या सेल के लिए इट कैन प्रिस्क्राइब गाइडलाइंस Then it will also approve the process or conditions for crediting period or renewal or retirement of such carbon credit certificates. And it can do any other functions as assigned by central government. So this is a very wide power, a very wide function, which will be determined by the central government as and when it deems fit. अब दूसरा चीज़ देखिए, for the purpose of administering the Indian carbon market, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, it has been designated as the ICM administrator. So this BEE, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, B will have to perform certain functions, have to play certain roles. For example, it will have to develop the standards and processes as well as the methods for registering projects under voluntary mechanism. It can also issue the carbon credit certificates on the recommendation or as per the recommendation of the governing body. And then it can develop certain targets for the entities under compliance mechanism. यानी इस साल के लिए कितना कितना emissions हो सकते हैं, तो that it can such targets it can set. Then it can recommend the fee towards implementation of carbon credit trading scheme. This will have to be done with the approval of the governing body, and it can also collect the fees from such registered entities. Then it can also constitute technical committees for the purpose of such scheme, and it can develop the process conditions for crediting period, renewal, retirement of carbon credits. ऐसे बहुत सारे it can functions it has to undertake, it will undertake, and other than that, अगर governing body या central government इसके लिए कोई और functions assign करे, if it assigns any other functions that it deems fit, so then the Bureau of Energy Efficiency has to perform those functions as well. Then there is this other body, Grid Controller of India Limited. Now that has been designated as Indian Carbon Market Registry. So registration purpose के लिए the Grid Control of India Limited, it will play a titular role. So as you can look at its functions, it will have to comply with the directions issued by the governing body or the Central Energy Regulatory Commission, CERC. Then it will have to register obligated and non-obligated entities, यानी under the compulsory या तो फिर voluntary mechanism के under जो भी entities है, it will have to register them. Then it will have to maintain record of all transactions and share the same with B and CRC के साथ. तो अगर कोई international registry हो या other national registry हो, तो उसके साथ it can help assist in establishing links as approved by the governing body. It will have to maintain a secure database again as approved by the governing body. And उसको information technology platform में कोई भी development लाया जाए तो उसमें grid controller has to assist. And then again it will have to perform any other function as assigned by the governing body or B as they deem fit. Now coming to the role of Central Energy Regulatory Commission. तो वो इसको डेजिग्नेट किया गया है एज द रेगुलेटर ऑफ ट्रेडिंग ऑफ कार्बन क्रेडिट सर्टिफिकेट्स. So basically it will work like how SEBI works for the financial market. Yani it will provide market oversights and prevent karega frauds and safeguard karega interest of sellers and buyers. So it will work as a regulatory body. CERC will work as a regulatory body. I've already spoken about compulsory market and the voluntary market. So similarly, the draft scheme talks about mechanism, the compliance mechanism and voluntary mechanism. So basically compliance mechanism will talk about how it will be mandatory for certain industries to oblige with this scheme. As I've told you, अंडर कंपल्सरी मार्केट जो इंडस्ट्रीज़ के कार्बन एमिशन या जे एमिशन बहुत हाई होते हैं, देयर कार्बन एमिशन और जे इंटेंसिटी इज़ very high. So those industries will fall under the obligated entities. They will become obliged to reduce their emissions in terms of tons of carbon dioxide emitted per ton of production. So they will have to necessarily register under the compliance mechanism. और जैसे जो नॉन ऑब्लिगेटेड एंटिटीज़ हैं, ठीक है ना, यानी जो इंडस्ट्रीज़ कम कार्बन एमिशन करते हैं, तो those industries can register under the voluntary mechanism for the issuance of carbon credit certificates. So let us try to sum up the importance and advantages of Indian carbon market and carbon credit certificates. So when industries realize that because of their greenhouse gas emissions, they are losing out on a lot of money due to the purchasing of extra carbon credit certificates or whatever, then we will see a decarbonizing process that is happening in the commercial and industrial segments. Basically, what they'll do is take all measures that are required or take any decision that is required to reduce their carbon footprint or, in general, greenhouse gas emissions. Say, for example, they will use such machineries that use low carbon power sources. So, this strategic reduction of greenhouse gases को ही decarbonization कहा जाता है. Now, industries will have the flexibility in deciding how they want to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Now, this will in turn lead to mobilizing of investment for a transition to low carbon ecosystem. इसके मतलब ICM, Indian Carbon Market, will become a channel for mobilization of funds जिससे ये low carbon transition allow कर सके. So basically this will attract finances and technology that can be used for more sustainable projects. Now, having the finance and technology for such sustainable projects will lead to, in overall, better manufacturing processes which will involve less carbon emissions. Yani, as I've said, they will try to use, like industries will try to use those kind of machineries and tools that have very low carbon footprint. Now, the overall importance of setting up of ICM would be helping India meet its nationally determined contributions. याद रखिएगा, ये जो कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑफ पार्टीज़ 26 COP26 या COP27, इसमें all the nations had to voluntarily submit what would their contributions be in tackling climate change. तो उसके अंडर India had also provided its NDC, which is now called as Panchamrit. So under that, it had said that it would lower its emission intensity of its GDP by 45% by 2030. Now, in order to make such reduction, you will require setting up of such carbon market, which will allow India to attain net zero and carbon neutrality. Net zero simply means कि जितना भी ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस प्रोड्यूस किया जाता है या तो फिर एटमॉस्फेयर में छोड़ा जाता है, equal amount of such greenhouse gas will be removed from the atmosphere using whatever technology is available. Carbon neutrality also has a similar meaning. इसका मतलब है जितना भी कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एटमॉस्फेयर में छोड़ा जाएगा उसे वही इक्वल अमाउंट एटमॉस्फेयर से रिमूव भी किया जाएगा बाय वेरियस मीन्स, देयरबाय लीविंग अ ज़ीरो बैलेंस. तो इसी को ही कार्बन न्यूट्रलिटी कहा जाता है या ज़ीरो कार्बन फुटप्रिंट. एक चीज़ याद रखिएगा कि अभी तक कोई भी गाइडलाइंस इशू नहीं किया गया है फॉर द प्रोसीजर और रेगुलेशन फॉर द फंक्शनिंग ऑफ कार्बन मार्केट्स. यानी इन डिटेल्स में कुछ नहीं दिया गया. बेसिकली इट हैज़ spoken about the setting up of the entities which will look into the governance or the administration or regulation of the Indian carbon market, but detailed guidelines have not been provided, and uske liye responsible hoga the National Steering Committee, which will be chaired by the Secretary of Ministry of Power. This brings us to the end of our video. We hope that you found this helpful. We do have a request. If you found this video informative, do like, share and subscribe Exact IS on YouTube and follow us on Instagram. I will see you in our next video. Thank you for watching this.